The rain had been falling since sundown, slicking the streets of Brookhaven in silver ribbons that caught every passing headlight. Officer James Callahan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his taxi's wipers struggling against the sheets of water hammering down. To anyone on the street, he was just another cabbie grinding out the midnight shift. But under the worn brown jacket and tired driver's cap was a man who had spent the last 15 years on the force, and who had never stopped carrying the ghosts of his mistakes. James was undercover, and not for the first time. His superiors trusted him for these assignments because he had the patience, the discipline, the ability to become someone else entirely. But this time felt different. This wasn't a drug bust or a sting on petty thieves. This operation had started with whispers about bodies showing up in alleys, about missing women no one reported until it was too late, about a name that floated through the criminal underground like a curse. The police had no leads, no witnesses, just fragments of information. The only certainty was that Brookhaven was harboring a predator. And so James had been planted here, in a battered yellow cab, his job to observe, to listen, to pick up the threads others couldn't. 4 weeks he had ferried drunk businessmen, night shift workers, couples with too much perfume and not enough patience. None of them had given him anything but complaints about the rain or the rising meter fare. But James knew enough to wait. Predators eventually moved. And sometimes, they confessed when they thought no one was listening. The clock on the dash blinked 12:17 a.m. when James pulled up outside a neon-lit diner. The street was empty save for a figure standing beneath the dripping awning, collar turned high against the rain. The man raised a hand. James pulled over, stopping with a hiss of brakes. The passenger slid into the backseat with a deliberate calm. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't hurried. He moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going. James adjusted the rearview mirror, taking him in. Mid-30s. Dark hair, combed with precision. A gray wool coat buttoned to the throat. His eyes, when they met James's in the mirror, were unreadable, cool as slate. "Where to?" James asked, voice casual, the kind of lazy drawl he'd perfected for this role. The man gave an address on the far side of town. An industrial area. Quiet at this hour. James noted it without reaction and pulled the cab into gear. The silence stretched as they drove. Rain drummed on the roof. The man's hands rested loosely on his knees, his posture too still, too measured. James had ferried enough people to recognize the types: chatterboxes, complainers, the silent ones. This one wasn't merely silent. He was listening. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was soft, almost pleasant, but carried a weight that immediately filled the cab. "You ever wonder," he said, "why people confess to strangers?" James kept his eyes on the road, careful. "What do you mean?" The man's lips curled in the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Because strangers don't matter. They don't judge. You can spill your darkest secret to a cab driver, and when you step out, it disappears into the night. Like it never happened." James gave a non-committal grunt. "Guess I've heard my share of secrets. Then maybe you'll appreciate mine." The words made James's stomach tighten, though his face betrayed nothing. He drove on, wipers squealing against the windshield. The man leaned forward slightly, his reflection sharp in the rearview mirror. "I killed someone tonight." James's pulse jumped. He forced his grip on the wheel to remain steady. "That's so?" he said lightly, as though the confession were nothing more than talk of a football game. "Yes," the man said. "Not the first time, either." The air in the cab thickened. James felt the weight of his badge, invisible under his jacket, pressing against his ribs. He couldn't arrest the man now. Not without blowing his cover, not without evidence. All he could do was keep him talking. "What makes you tell me?" James asked, careful, coaxing. The man's eyes glinted in the mirror. "Because you'll forget. That's what strangers do. And because I like watching people squirm when they hear the truth." James offered a dry chuckle. "You don't look like a killer." "Neither did she," the man replied. James's blood iced. He kept his voice even. "Who?" The passenger tilted his head. "Does it matter?" she begged. "They always do." The rest of the drive passed in silence, thick with unspoken dread. When they reached the address, the man paid in crisp bills and slipped out into the rain. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. He simply vanished into the darkened warehouse district, leaving James alone in the cab with the echo of his words. "I killed someone tonight." James didn't go home. He drove 2 blocks, pulled over, and called it in on his hidden radio. His handler's voice crackled in his earpiece, sharp with alarm. "Repeat that, Callahan." He confessed, James said, low. Passenger claimed he killed someone tonight. Dropped him near the old textile warehouses on 9th. We need eyes on that place now. Within minutes, unmarked cars converged. But when they searched, they found nothing. No suspect. No body. No trace of a crime. It was as though the man had never been there at all. For the next week, James drove his shifts in heightened alert. Every passenger felt like a shadow of the man in the gray coat. Every silence in the backseat hummed with menace. He barely slept, mind replaying the confession, the way the man's voice had carried certainty rather than guilt. Then the newspapers hit, unidentified woman found dead near riverbank. The details were scarce, but James knew. The timeline, the location, it matched. She had been strangled. And worse, her description bore a resemblance to another missing woman from 6 months earlier. The man hadn't lied. The passenger returned on a Thursday, just after midnight. James recognized him instantly, the way one recognizes a nightmare revisited. He flagged the cab outside the same diner. His expression was calm, almost cheerful. You again, James said, feigning surprise. The man settled into the back. You drive well. I trust you. James's heart hammered. Where to? This time the address was downtown. A high-rise apartment building. As they drove, the man began to talk. Not idle chatter. Stories. Each one darker than the last. He spoke of following women from bus stops, of learning their routines, of the way fear tasted in the air when they realized too late they weren't alone. James listened, every word etching deeper into his brain. He couldn't break cover. Not yet. But he needed something solid, a name, a place, a detail that could be verified. Then the man said it. A name. Eleanor Dwyer. James nearly swerved. Eleanor Dwyer had been a case he'd worked 5 years ago. A college student who had vanished one rainy night. The case that haunted him. The one he never solved. The man smiled faintly at James's silence. You remember her, don't you? You were the officer who knocked on her parents' door. Told them you'd find her. But you didn't. James's blood ran cold. The man knew him. You're not just a cabbie, the man murmured, eyes glinting. Are you? The trap had been sprung. James felt it in his bones. The man had chosen him deliberately, lured him into this game. He drove to the address, hands steady despite the storm inside him. When they arrived, the man leaned forward, voice low. I'll see you again. And next time, I'll show you something. Something you've been looking for. Then he slipped out into the rain once more, vanishing into the building's lobby. James sat frozen in the driver's seat, Eleanor Dwyer's face flashing through his memory. The case that had ended his marriage, that had carved sleepless nights into his life. And now, here was the man who had taken her, taunting him from the backseat of his own cab. He called it in again. Surveillance teams moved on the building, but just like before, the man evaporated. No lease. No trace. A ghost. Over the next nights, James became obsessed. He drove endless loops of the city, scanning every diner, every shadow. And each time the man appeared, it was the same. Another chilling story, another breadcrumb from the past, another reminder that James had failed. Until one night, the man slid into the backseat carrying a small box. He set it on the seat beside him with quiet reverence. This, he said softly, is hers. James's breath caught. Whose? Eleanor's. He opened the box. Inside lay a delicate silver locket, tarnished with age. James had seen it once before, in a photograph on Eleanor's dresser, the night she disappeared. That was the moment James knew he couldn't wait for backup. Couldn't wait for procedure. He pulled the cab sharply into an alley, engine idling, doors locked. You're not leaving this car, James said, voice hard. The man only smiled. You finally stopped pretending. Good. The struggle was fast, brutal. The man fought with a precision that shocked James, a predator used to control. But James's fury carried him. They grappled in the confined space until James slammed him against the door, cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. When backup arrived minutes later, James was shaking, rain soaking his shirt. They dragged the man out, his smile never fading. You'll never prove it, he whispered to James as they hauled him away. Bodies don't stay buried forever. But secrets? Secrets last longer. Weeks passed. The man, identified as Daniel Crow, faced charges, but evidence was scarce. The locket was real, but no bodies had been found. Prosecutors hesitated. James sat in his cab one last time before turning in the keys, staring at the empty backseat. The city moved outside, unaware of the predator who had ridden these streets, of the secrets whispered in the dark. He had caught Crow. But the man's words gnawed at him still. Because late at night, when the streets grew quiet, James could almost hear his voice again, low and certain. "I killed someone tonight." And James wondered if Crow had been telling him everything. Or if somewhere out there, in the rain-soaked streets of Brookhaven, another passenger was waiting to confess.